Perfect. Okay, so any of you who've seen me before, you'll know that even standing still in front of this thing is going to be a challenge. So I really need this, otherwise we're not going to get anywhere. Forgiving the formatting because it's a bit broken. I'm here to talk about being secure. I think most of us here in our careers, me certainly, and a lot of the IoTSF work focuses on building secure and buying secure. And this is certainly a very important thing to do. All the embedded security things, the ARM trust zones, the key injections, the ESTs, desperately important, needed improvements. But once you've done that, you still have to kind of carry on because day one's not good enough. Once there's a big fire in the basement, you can't just sort of claim that it was okay last year. It's not really how things work. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Illustrated by this guy here. I mean, no matter how hard we try to make really secure stuff, and heaven knows, there's probably several hundred years of combined experience of trying to put embedded crypto and things into devices. Things are inviolable at some point, and they're sold as inviolable, but if that were really true, then you'd never have had to improve this thing, right? Somebody found a hack eventually. The longest lived physical lock only lasted about 50 years, I think, and nobody was really trying to break it that hard. And certainly, if we consider that firmware breaks, identity keys, and things are not the only way that you can lose security, I think we have to accept that there is no end to this concept that things will always be degraded. They'll always end up being subject to some kind of hack. And if we consider not only things like cryptography and embedded digital IDs, but also the fact that change of control of a supplier might have an impact. You might suddenly not trust your router supplier, for example, or the software maker who used to have lovely open source stuff and now it's owned by an evil corporation, because that's never happened before, right? You've always got to be prepared to change things, to accept that you're degraded, and to do something about the new situation that you find yourself in, no matter how well you build secure. Now, we're here in the IoTSF. Obviously, most of that name talks about the Internet of Things. I actually think this is a bit of a problem. Talking about the Internet of Things and trying to be security professionals leads people down a really bad road because it really persuades you that the Internet of Things is like the Internet, and it persuades us that the kind of technologies that we should be using are like Internet security technologies. And actually, that's not a great idea. There's a lot of stuff that we've done in the Internet which kind of works only because it's not physical. And if you have a really hard protocol problem, you just stick a shim or an abstraction or something, or a translation or protocol layer. You can't do that in the IoT because the IoT is mostly things. It's much less Internet. And putting gobs of shims and routers and gateways and things in the way just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make financial sense. It doesn't work. So you've got to approach these things much more from the point of view that they are physical extant objects that happen to be connected, rather than being Internet technologies. And this is where a lot of experiments with PKI and stuff almost work, and then all of a sudden you find there's some juddering halt where it doesn't scale in complexity, it doesn't scale in organizations, things like that, even though it looks really helpful in POCs. So, things are only secure until they're not, and bear in mind, I'm not, in my role, thinking about, random widgets in the home or smartwatches or things. The kind of stuff that we're interested in is real industrial stuff. We want to actually make the connected world work. We want connected cities. We want smart transit. All of these things we want to work. But this only exemplifies the kind of problems that you have when you're trying to make devices actually secure against threats and actually secure for their entire life. Because again, IoTSF's mandate is to build secure, buy secure, be secure. In these contexts, this stuff lasts 25 years, maybe, a bit more, 60 years, maybe. Won't be the same software, but the device itself and a lot of the operating parameters and all the constraints, they're there for a long, long time. So, we have best practice. We have best practice. Other people also have best practice. We kind of realize that software is not great, and it needs to be upgraded every now and again, and you need to take account of the changing landscape. But this is kind of easier said than done, because sure, you should disclose vulnerabilities. Sure, you should have firmware upgrade capabilities. But again, if you're working in an industrial context, if you're working in a safety context, if you've got safety critical or public liability type use cases, at the moment, we've got this really horrible sort of Hobson's choice, where everybody's saying, well, you've got to upgrade all your stuff, otherwise you're an idiot. And on the other side, you've got all the safety things and the compliance, your conformance certificates, your DVAs, your legal liability exposures, your insurance responsibility. You've got a ton of stuff saying, don't bloody touch that thing. You've got an approved configuration which has been tested, which has been approved, which everybody knows, which an expert in a different company has signed off. And if you run that lift, that baggage carousel, that unmanned transit system, not with the configuration and the firmware version and the supplier piece that it was tested with, maybe 18 months ago, you're being irresponsible. So we've got this horrible sort of mix of responsibilities and a very difficult choice where basically you can either be secure and up to date or compliant and working with an approved configuration, but not really both, because the work of recertifying, reclassifying, retype approving every, for example, baggage carousel in the world is just too much. You don't have enough auditors. You don't have enough time to keep doing it. It is now time to answer that question. So NIS came into force almost 2 years ago. Everybody's been sort of very lenient, and we've got this nice sort of wandering in period where we get to kind of assess where everybody's at and see what the scale of the problem is. But in May next year, that'll be the 2-year anniversary, the enforcement is going to start. And so we really need to come up with an answer to this problem and not just keep standing up in stages in conference rooms talking about it. And we think we have something to say about that in terms of the operations of all of these folks. Because if you look at I'm going to skip that bit because it's less interesting. If you look at what people are trying to do in maintaining security and safety and operations, making their stuff work properly, they've got a lot of issues in reaching NIS compliance or any kind of compliance. Every industry has their own vertical stuff. They've got to do things. And they've got invisible supply chain risks, and they've actually got risks where the supply chain doesn't necessarily care because they're just selling their devices, they don't have any legal liability, they don't have any exposure. If there's a crash, the train company doesn't generally have the issue. It's the train operator who has the issue, for example. They've got to prove that they're compliant, and that's hard enough because these systems are super complex. And in some cases, I just mentioned trains, so I'll mention trains again. If a train breaks down, it needs to be fixed. Where it is typically determines who fixes it, and that's not going to be an employee of the train operator company. It's not going to be someone who runs the track. It's going to be a maintenance person in a shed in the town or the jurisdiction where the thing actually happened. And so you've got lots of different companies who have lots of different silos of information, lots of different processes and hiring and people and person. It's really complicated to prove that you actually have full control of the configuration, the safety, the security, the maintenance state of your devices when you're operating in a multi-person world. And so we actually think that this whole, the CIA triangle, great, everybody knows security is about the CIA triangle, but actually that's baked now. We know all about that, and we need to move for the CISO, the responsible party, to know what they're doing. We need to move on now to have these other qualities. We need continuity and visibility. We need to know what's going on. Bear in mind, sunlight is the greatest disinfectant, right? So if you want to take bad things out of your system, expose them. It's kind of nice. You need to be able to collaborate, and you need to be able to automate. Automation is essential because the scale of the problem is just too big. The constrained budgets issue at the bottom, it's at the bottom because it's the punchline. That's a huge deal. We cannot keep doing things the way we do them and just hire more and more and more people. Yes?
What were you suggesting that the CISO pays?
Oh, this is the CISO in the organization that owns the asset. So if you look at most of the regulation, almost all the regulations, the owner of the asset whose logo is on it, whether it's a refinery or a train or whatever else, they're the ones who are initially and ultimately responsible for any kind of breaches.
But that's not the CISO. In many of those outfits, they don't have a CISO.
In many of those outfits, they do have a CISO. Well, I'll take the question at the end. It's an interesting question. Sure. In any case, they will have some assigned responsible person who has to ultimately be responsible for getting all your compliance reports in, for dealing with problems, everything else. And the regulations that are coming through, it's not just NIS, you've also got things like the DCMS, who put in all of these requirements for connected cars. Most of the main principles are about collaboration and supply chain through life operations. Very little about the sort of built-in stuff. NCSC, 2 years ago now, Jackie Chard came out saying cybersecurity is a team sport at all kinds of levels. You know, they talk about it as international team sport, it's an intra-company team sport, and it's an inter-company team sport. You've got to collaborate, and everybody needs to do a different thing at a different time. For instance, you know, the owner of the asset isn't going to write the firmware patch that fixes a firmware bug. You've still got to go back down the supply chain to pick up your new firmware. So that's a problem when you live in the world of the internet, which likes to move fast and break things. What we'd like to do is find a way of moving fast and fixing things so that you can actually deal with things like, we find a vulnerability in some firmware, how do we get back through that digital supply chain, identify the problem, order the patch, get the thing done, get it reapproved in the integrator. In many cases, in large projects, the person doing the integration and doing the type approving, the person who's legally viewed as technically capable or responsible for saying a whole system is safe is probably not working for the company that ultimately has their logo on it as responsible. So I've got to go right from all of the suppliers into the DVA, into the installation, and then I have to schedule downtime, and I have to know when it's appropriate to actually put the patch in, because the only thing you can know for sure is the day the patch is released is not the time you want to put it in. Whether it's 1, 30, or 100 days later, well, that's an interesting question, and you definitely have to demonstrate how you made that choice and why you made that choice in your compliance reports. But for sure, you never know in advance what the right answer to that question is going to be. It's always situation specific. So how do we actually take that at the scale it's going to be, with millions of sensors, with millions of gateways, well, thousands of gateways, let's say. How do we actually scale the models we have today and still demonstrate compliance and still know how to keep things safe and not sort of go to bed at night panicking that we don't know what's going on? So this is where the distributed ledgers come in. I think I'm gratified that we've been working, so Rob, my colleague here, we've been working on security and compliance systems for IoT on distributed ledgers for coming on 2 years in my case, and 18 months since we formed the company with Rob. But I'm gratified that I keep meeting people who are blockchain skeptics, and they say, I really don't like blockchain, but you've actually got a use case that makes sense. And the reason for that is because distributed applications in general, I'm not standing up for any specific technology, but distributed applications have the visibility and all the stakeholders seeing the same thing. When you're getting into what's effectively a liability game, that's really important. Everybody needs to know that they've got fair access to the evidence base and what's going on. So if they didn't screw up, they're covered by their insurance, they're covered by legal, whatever it might be. You have the collaboration, you have a way of interacting. One of the biggest issues, one of the biggest hurdles that people have on these big integrated systems is simply having a way of communicating which doesn't involve phoning up or emailing somebody to translate your paper records into their paper records, and then again and again and again. The overheads in these supply chains are huge, and it's all about not being able to collaborate through a single system. You've got continuity. You know that the things are going to be fine. They're forever. This is like future-proofing your compliance, because you can't have an outage that will take the whole thing down. You can't have one actor who will suddenly just sort of whip their keys away and you can't see anything anymore. You can't have people going back in time and falsifying records and putting in fake clean water reports when actually they've got really bad pollution reports. And you get to automate things because now that you've got that trust in the data, you can actually trust the processes that act on data. So all of those boring jobs that a lot of very skilled people and CISOs employees spend doing basically pointless work because they have to check something, and 99% of the time it's fine. Instead of spending all that time, you can actually automate that because now you trust the data that's driving those audit decisions and those compliance decisions. So we take this with showing the very basics of what a ledger does, which is that it's a permanent record of when, who did what to a thing. So if you know exactly how your devices have been treated over time. You get to have something like a full service history. So your car, if it has a full service history, people can see, they know it's been well treated, they know it's been serviced with good parts, they know if there's a gap, and you can assess the value and the trustworthiness and the market worthiness of that vehicle based on the fact that you know exactly how it came to be in this state. And you know, for example, that it hasn't just suddenly been spray painted and polished and someone's going to sort of, it makes it look good today, but actually it's got some horrible history to it. No, instead you can see the entire history of everything that ever happened, and all those problems of, we kind of think our train was serviced properly and we think the guys were qualified because we wouldn't give it to someone who's not qualified, but we can't prove it anymore because we lost those records. All of that stuff goes away and allows you to actually work on the intelligence about the devices and from the devices that you're getting based on this trustworthiness of having a single source of truth. I think one thing I just mentioned, that one of the biggest hurdles is the collaboration, that the technical means of communicating and working together are not terribly good. But the legal means of working together are not very good either, because what tends to happen, and we see this, we can take this in blockchain or DLT cases, but you also see this hugely in IoT cases, that you get into a proof of concept with a customer, and everything's wonderful, it looks brilliant, you make a press release, and you forecast the great sort of Star Trek utopia new world, and then you move on to try and make it a real business case, and all of a sudden it falls apart. And one of the big reasons why it falls apart is because it comes to a procurement department, and the procurement department look at this and they say, well, what's the value of this thing? You say, well, I've got lots of data, and I can share that data, and I can sell that data, and we can do more if we share data. And they say, well, okay, so great. So what you're actually saying is that you're asking me to sign a contract which brings liability on me, which brings a possibility of accidents, which brings a possibility of compliance failures and losing my license to operate. You're telling me I'm going to sign that, and we're going to do that on the basis of devices that other people are servicing, on data that's coming from other people? No, we can't do that. We can't take that risk. And we see that coming up time and time again. By moving towards a model where you have a single source of truth, where you have a framework which is about mutually distrustful, but optimistically trustful systems, by having a system which actually is based on the idea that sunlight is a great disinfectant, that people are generally good, that sometimes mistakes happen, but it's fine, we'll work it out, but at least you can't actually fake the system. By taking all of those nasty edge cases away, you can actually encourage people to take that risk and take the opportunity of IoT without that horrible risk that you'll be sent a fraudulent signal by somebody who doesn't have as good hiring processes as you, and then you're suddenly responsible for that uninsured event. Take all of that away. So this obviously is a very short slot, can't go too much into details, but we do have a white paper on this that you can get from our website, which is kind of nice. So I don't know how many of you in here have read NIS, or if you're under NIS. It's really vague in many ways. It's great because it's outcome-based, and I really like outcome-based compliance. This is super, but it's not very actionable because you can't tell the operators of essential services, you can't really tell them what to do. So what we've done is we've sort of married this up with the NIST cybersecurity framework, which has more sort of very specific pointers, guidance, things that you can do in all of these various categories, and highlighted where collaborative technologies, distributed technologies, where a single source of truth or shared cryptographically verified truth actually can help in achieving compliance to NIS, which I will remind people, the clock is ticking to the real enforcement phase now in May of next year. So yeah, you go to the website, you can pick that up. And the short version of it is, everything works today. We're not trying to overthrow the world. This is a whole thing. Blockchain people stand up and say, we're going to change everything because the world's rubbish. We're not. We want the world to stay basically exactly as it is, but just work better. And this means replacing the paper records that are lossy, the shared databases which are expensive and don't allow access to the smaller guys, and the trusted third parties who are never trusted by everybody. They always ends up being a kind of industry interest. So there you go. So the real meat detail information of this talk is in the white paper. So please do go there. Either come to me, come to Rob with a business card, or go to the website. You can pick it up. But I think the most important thing we can remember is that if we're truly going to build a secure IoT, it is a team sport. It has to be managed collaboratively. And while building secure is absolutely essential, it's not enough. You have to put in place processes and shared trust systems to be secure, not for day one, but for day 1,000. Next.